So I've been working in tandem with JD Faccinetti for many years now, Pituitary World News, and he wanted to do a talk about the importance of advocacy. And let me tell you a little bit about JD. JD was diagnosed with acromegaly in October of 2010. Doctors missed his condition for 30 years. So he decided to do something to make sure that it happens less. He founded Pituitary World News in 2014 with Louis Blevins, MD, a pituitary neuroendocrinologist and director of the Center of Pituitary Disorders at UCSF. His professional career includes over 30 years of marketing management, communications, and research experience. He has worked for top national communication agencies and developed marketing and communications programs for international and national leading brands. He is an expert in strategy development, communications, voice of the consumer, and non-traditional qualitative research. His brand experience includes work for Del Monte, Nabisco Brands, Sony, Hewlett-Packard, Cellular One, AT&T, the state of California, Harrah's Entertainment, and social marketing nonprofit organizations. JD retired in 2018 and is dedicating his time to work on behalf of Pituitary World News to benefit pituitary patients worldwide. His firm, Ignite Thinking, uses non-traditional research approaches to deliver his clients insights, inspiration, change, and growth. Assignments focused on research, brand strategy, marketing, communication, and in the corporate and nonprofit sectors. And with all that being said, JD. Yeah, and I got some rest last night, if you can't tell. I can read this morning.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you for agreeing to do this. We've always wanted to do a presentation together, and I think this will give you a little idea of how we work together and the importance of the type of work that the acromegaly community does in the grassroots area directly with patients, and how we try to amplify the work that it's done so more people learn about what's going on and increase the conversation of pituitary disease. We started, go ahead.
Click her button.
Yeah.
Where the button is.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Right there.
I can't see it. Anyway, so we call this getting it done, and this is a team effort. This is a village that is required to reach the objectives that we have. And I think when we first started thinking about early diagnosis, one of the issues that we concentrate on is what are the sort of things that we can do to affect, and can we do it in a way that a little bit of work creates a maximum of impact? Because obviously the work is overwhelming sometimes when you look at the different strategies that you can take to solve these issues and the amount of resources that it would take, not just money, but people, resources, and amount of work. So this is a discussion about collaboration and community engagement and awareness, and how to amplify the work that you all do, so other people that are maybe not related directly to pituitary disease, but can make an impact or generate change. I think that one of the things that we discussed when we first started talking about doing this was a very good example of a project that the acromegaly community undertook, which was the PFDD, Patient-Focused Drug Development, that was organized by the FDA. And I think that was tremendous, because it was the first time I think that acromegaly was featured or focused by the FDA. So I'm going to let Jill talk about that, and then I'm going to explain to you how we work to amplify the work that's done. So, okay. Great.
So the patient-focused drug development program, I was actually at a public policy meeting with Rochelle Dempsey, one of our patients, and I was in front of all these people that literally don't have any treatment at all. And there were so many patients up there that were standing up and doing testimonies saying, you know, no matter what it is, please give us some kind of treatment. And I stood up, thanks to Rochelle, and said, she signed me up to speak, and said, you know, we have existing therapies within this condition, but there are issues. And even though we do have these existing therapies, our quality of life still isn't what I believe it to be. Rochelle had helped me a few years ago on a project that we had done, giving the AcroQOL to all of our patients within the group. And we had over 350 of those patients fill this out. And in that, I was really somewhat shocked and saddened. I knew that it would be bad, but I didn't expect it to be as bad as what it was. And I'll give you some data, which Rochelle had helped me with this project, from over 350 people filling this out. These are just everyday, normal patients living their life. But for instance, I feel ugly, and 80.3% completely to moderately agreed with that statement of the over 350 people that filled this out. I get depressed. 85.6% of patients said that they get depressed always to sometimes. I look awful in photographs. 83.9% completely agreed to moderately agreed. I try to avoid socializing. 71% said always to sometimes. I look different in the mirror. 85.4% agreed to moderately agreed. I have trouble carrying out my usual activities. 87.8% said always to sometimes. And when you're looking at 350 acromegaly patients doing a survey, those are amazing numbers, first of all. I mean, most surveys are lucky to get 150. And this was over 350 that filled this out. Some parts of my body, nose, feet, hands, etc., are too big. 90.5% agree to moderately agree. I have trouble doing things with my hands. 78.8% said always to sometimes. This illness affects my performance at work or doing my usual task. 84.8% said always to sometimes. My joints ache, which was just really shocking to me. 93.4% said always to sometimes. I feel tired. 96.7% said always to sometimes. These results are what made me decide we have to do something to help ourselves. And that's what pushed us forward to do the patient-focused drug development program. Because I work with a lot of different companies and such within this arena, there were some companies that came to me and said, we've spoke to physicians and they say that there's no unmet need within acromegaly. And yeah, it's shocking. But then whenever you talk to patients, we see that there is a true need. And in my opinion, one of the most valuable things that happened with the patient-focused drug development program, where we had instantaneous polling, was we asked, how many of you consider yourself in biochemical control. And 76% of the respondents said always to sometimes. But then we ask patients, the same patients, how many of yourself consider yourself with symptomatic control? And 51% said rarely to never. And when your rarely to never for symptomatic control is higher than the other, there's still a lot more work that needs to be done. And hopefully, by doing this work, new companies that develop new medications have to take the Voice of the Patient report, which is a 93-page document that outlines that meeting, into consideration whenever they make new drugs, and say, are we meeting these endpoints to meet the unmet need within this community? So that was a little bit about the Patient-Focused Drug Development Initiative. And we work with JD to help spread the word about meetings like this and other projects that we work on to try to improve the quality of life of patients. So I'll let him get back to talking.
Thanks, Jenna. It was truly a fantastic project, and we were delighted to be involved in it. That's the reason why. Sorry?
Go to the next slide.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I will in a second. So what I want to do today is show you what Pituitary World News is, a little bit of history. I'm not going to take too much time. I'm going to move through the slides quickly because I know we don't have time and we do all want a break. So I encourage you, if you have any questions, to come up to me and chat with me. I want you to know that the door to Pituitary World News is open to all of you to collaborate, to talk, to comment, to figure out how we do this better. Jill and I talk, I think, weekly about ideas and initiatives and, hey, what about this and what about that? So it's been for me personally, it's been a wonderful experience to be involved in this. And so I'm gonna very quickly walk you through the slides. These I think the plans for the acromegaly community for next year. Let me know if you want to jump in.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
And obviously, there's quality of life initiatives and clinical trial supports and awareness and advocacy are very important. This is a grassroots project that Jill just described to you. And there was tremendous, the things that I took away from it, there were some very good summaries, and initially was the profound mismatch between the biological findings and the way people felt. How all these negative symptoms affect negatively the quality of life, and the amount of time that it takes to get to a diagnosis, 8 to 10 years. In my case, as you know, it was a lot longer than that. And the description of lengthy and complicated treatment journeys. That is something that when we get first diagnosed, we think it just happens to us. And it's just so pervasive through the community. It happens to everybody. We all have the same story. So those are the things that I think I participated in one of the panels for the PFTD, and it was really quite interesting. I think we should do a lot more of that. So I'm going to just walk you through how Pituitary World News grew and how we reach the different markets and the sort of ideas that we think about when we think about creating awareness. And awareness is, the dynamic is easy. If we can generate enough interest from people to understand what pituitary disease is, when they go to the doctor, they may be able to focus the physician earlier because they're aware of these conditions. And on the other hand, the physician can suspect the diagnosis a little sooner than they do. We think that if we can shave 3 or 4 years of the average, which is huge, but let's say 2 or 3, the impact on quality of life would be quite dramatic, because then all these related conditions would be less. In my case, 20 years, I had 2 hip replacements, 2 knee replacements, 1 recently. And, all that probably, if I would have been diagnosed a little earlier, may have not happened. So, and that's so pervasive and so common. So this is why we created Pituitary Wellness, to increase awareness so more people are diagnosed properly and early, to facilitate also the communication between physician and patient, and to just in essence try to make people aware of the news and the information that's out there about pituitary disease. We use scientifically sound news, insight and knowledge about in writing the articles, and we do a lot of opinion editorials and commentaries and things like that that are interesting to read. I was very happy to learn that we have these plain language summaries that are fantastic, because we basically generate a story and say this is an interesting study, but we have to usually link it to a very complicated scientific study. A plain language helps very much.
I was just published.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So we just did a plain language study from the MyCAPSA trial, and to make it easier to understand for the average patient. But it really helps to put things in layman's terms, for you or I to understand. I'm thrilled to work with companies that like to do things like that to make it easier for patients. And anytime any company wants to do something like that, I always say, please do, and help me be a part of it.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. So these are this is basically what we are. Pituitary Wellness is a web-style magazine. It's fashioned like a news clearinghouse. I like to describe it like we're the Huffington Post of the pituitary world. So we support it extensively with SEO. We are all over social media. That brings its own challenges. Unfortunately, we have to deal with very restrictive algorithms now that actually we publish something, but they don't show it to you. So Facebook, since they're not making enough money, they want us to pay for the boost the show. So we're considering doing that, but it wouldn't be my choice. And we are strictly adhere to scientific-based methods. One of the issues that we deal constantly with is a tremendous amount of misinformation and pretty much garbage that there is on the internet. So we fight that all the time. This is how we reach our impact worldwide. It's around 62% of our audience comes from the US, 12% in the UK, 8% Canada. Obviously, it's an English language publication. But we're reaching 3% in India, and then the rest of it's about 10%, which is, Latin America, parts of the Middle East. So we're pretty much worldwide, even though the numbers outside of the top three are fairly low. We just started publishing in Spanish, and we hope that that's going to create some attention in Latin America and Spain and the Spanish-speaking world. And I was just talking to Maite last night about possibly publishing in French from the French-speaking world. So that looking forward to that. Slowly, we're just going to try to get to the world. This is more or less our usage details. We get between 8 and 12,000 visitors on average. Somewhere in there, it's where it falls. 60% come through, we call it new, but it's probably, some of that is repeat, but it's what we call organic searching, which is people search for a term and we show up with either an article or something like that, or a podcast. We have an international audience that's growing. Mobile is usually the preferred device. So we are very conscious about how we design the site so it's okay to look at it on the phone. I invite you all to look at it if you haven't. And typically we go from 3 to 3.6 pages per visit, and our duration is about 528 minutes. So people spend an average of 5 minutes on the site, which is pretty high. Usually, when people are going through the internet, they're going very fast. So that has an implications of the type of stories we write, how we write them to create attention and keep people on the site as much as possible. And this is an interesting, we did this, I'm gonna make sure I don't go over it, okay. when we first started thinking about pituitary well news, we started thinking about the types of audiences that would have impact to recognize pituitary disease and potentially reduce the time or suspect the disease sooner rather than later, or recognize it and refer someone to a qualified physician. So obviously this is a humongous task, but the strategy would be to eventually create a communications campaign directed at each of these audiences. So we could start thinking of, for example, how does the primary care, obviously the primary care physician is a no-brainer, no, but they're very difficult to reach. But patient blogs in other areas. We work with some of the Squeaky Joints, great arthritis, Washington D.C. based blog about arthritic pain and pain in general. And I was going to ask Dr. Higueras about it, but. Yeah. Anyway, but for example, the related specialty physicians and pharmacists, ophthalmologists, governmental health organizations, whenever we have an opportunity to plant a story or a podcast or something about pituitary disease in this audience, we try to do it in a targeted way. And I would encourage you all to, if you have access to some of this or know some of these websites that are that may make sense for us to collaborate with, to let me know so we can just start to feed these stories to them. We recently started working with a histiocytosis group that has diabetes insipidus is one of the symptoms. And they started, we started getting all this traffic on our DI content. Well, they share that symptom with us. Or that condition. So, and we will be able to generate a lot of awareness about pituitary disease in that group. So all of that synergy is really interesting. Anyway, all of these are. I'm not going to go through all of this, but. And we also had a logic when this, sorry it's so little, but I'll be happy to, but it basically says that when you think about impact and how to do things, you go through a process that takes you from an assumption to impacts. And you go through this thinking about how your assumptions, what kind of activities you need to do, what kind of outputs you expect, what kind of outcomes from those outputs you expect, and then the kind of impact you do. So this logic, I mean, it's thinking about impact and how we do it in a way that the story won't get lost and people will pay attention to. So Jill and I talk constantly about this, which is the impact. It is important to tell the story about pituitary disease, but how you tell it is critical, because if you're not telling it right, then people will they don't pay attention to it. I think we often talk about stigma, for example, and the idea that physicians that are very inexperienced, or in general healthcare practitioners that are very inexperienced, will dismiss somebody's symptoms because they don't look like Andrew the Giant, because when you look at the literature, that's all you see. And so those things, in terms of how we tell the story of acromegaly, are pretty critical. This is a disease that can happen to anybody, and it can happen randomly, and it probably happens a lot more than we think it does. I think one of actually the person that introduced us, John Manthorpe from Pfizer, once told me, we were chatting, that for every diagnosed person, there's probably 3, I think was his number, walking around without any idea what they have until it's too late, even though they're exhibiting several of the symptoms. So the other thing is that information has to generate attention, otherwise it's just noise, and we have a tremendous amount of noise. It's very difficult to get to that audience in a meaningful way, so they pay attention and they engage. This is an idea of where where we play. I don't know, Jen, if you want to make any comments about this. So these are the people that we work with: advocacy groups, the search engines, social media, professional trade directors and consumer health publications, mainstream media, and more. We've been lucky to have Endocrine News, for example, pick up a few of the podcasts that we've done. We had a story on the New York Times by Lisa Sanders, who's the physician that writes the health column in the New York Times, and also has a program on Netflix called Diagnosis. Wonderful program if you haven't seen it. But they wrote a story about actually early diagnosis. It was very interesting. And our plans moving forward is to obviously continue to do what we're doing and broaden it as much as we can, collaborate with as many organizations as we can possibly can to get this word out, and continue to encourage the dialogue with the work that Gilles does between policy makers and patients, so there's more representation, there's more of the voice of the patient there, and continue to participate in multidisciplinary approaches, so we can get people involved as much as possible.
So one of the things that he's doing is he's doing a live show.
Oh yes, thank you for letting me that.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. You can sell it for me.
So, I mean, I've spoke on his live show, myself and Charmin McGraw, as advocates. She's a Cushing advocate, but we want those stories to get out there because someone searching for a diagnosis might hear your story and say, that sounds like me. Maybe I should be checked for this condition. So, yeah. I mean, he's doing wonderful, wonderful work.
Thank you.
And anytime we do a project, I team with him because I know I can do the social media thing to our groups, but he can get it to even a broader path. And we want to try to hit everyone out there that we can. So, we're going to take a short cookie break today. At 10:45, we're going to give out our advocacy awards. This year, I'm going to give 2, and those people have no idea that they're getting an award. So try to be back in here at 10:45 if you can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.